Childish Gambino's new album is finally out, and it may be the last Childish Gambino album that we ever get. Now, if that is to be the case, then I want to take a look back at sort of a brief history on all the times that Donald Glover either hinted at or outright said that he wants to retire the Childish Gambino name. That's what we're going to do in this video. The history, it dates back a little bit further than I first thought, and we're also going to be taking a look at why. Like, why is the reasoning been that he's given that this is something that he wants to do? We're going to talk about all of that. We got a couple other stories to get to as well. But what's up? I'm Devon here again for Obligatory, showing up for you every Friday with a music news recap. For many people out there, and including myself, honestly, before doing some of this research, this story goes back to 2017, and 2017 was the first time Childish Gambino actually said something, basically saying, I'm making one more Childish Gambino album, and then I'm done. And so again, for a lot of people out there, this was the first time we all had to entertain the idea that Donald Glover might move on from the Childish Gambino moniker, and would he just move on from music entirely? Now again, he had just released Awaken My Love, very different from the last several Childish Gambino albums, and so I remember thinking, is he gonna just stop rapping and then be another artist as sort of a singer-songwriter? But as I looked a little bit more into this story, I realized this actually goes back to 2014-15 as being the first time that there were rumors out there. Now, I think the reason this really became something people were concerned about in 2015, almost a whole decade ago, was from this quote in an interview that Donald Glover was doing in promo of a movie that he was in around that time, The Lazarus Effect. So again, this is something that Donald Glover at this point now in 2024 has probably been mulling over for well over a decade at this point. And I guess has sort of always seen it as something to come to an end eventually. Fast forward to 2018, Glover confirmed that while he still wanted to retire the name, he was actively working on a project at the time, which mirrors what he said in 2017, that the next Gambino album would be the last. And of course, we know now that he was working on Atavista at that time, which he would eventually release as 3/15/2020, and of course we know now was recently re-released as Atavista, almost as originally intended, here in 2024. You know, like I said, eventually we get that project in March, and then in October, he is doing performances and concerts, at which point in one of these he says, you bought a ticket to the last Childish Gambino tour ever. So at this point, he's announced the last Childish Gambino album and the last Childish Gambino tour, which of course we know now is not true, right? We just got a new album today, and we know that there's a tour coming here very soon for the summer. In 2023, Donald confirmed the update that the Childish Gambino moniker was not yet retired, and he hinted at these new couple projects that we did just get this year in 2024. And so now we kind of have to wonder where we go from here, given what we've seen over the past decade to this point. Now, there's been a lot of reporting as to why Donald Glover might want to do something like this. A lot of times after he makes one of these public hints or statements, a publication will then ask him about it, and he'll expound a little bit, but a lot of times his reasoning is more artistically philosophical. It's less concrete as to why exactly he really wants to move on from it. And while those statements are probably very genuine and real, you know, I do notice that a lot of times the artists want to end up changing or retiring a stage name. It really comes down to business reasons. And at this point, I'm sure there is sort of this separation in business between what is Donald Glover and what is Childish Gambino. And given that he has his own companies, he has films and TV shows and things that he's been a part of where he uses that name Donald Glover, I just imagine that at some point he's wanted to consolidate what is all going on here. Also, I feel like the introduction of Gilga as a production company is something that might, you know, maybe play a role in this and allow him to eventually release music as Donald Glover under that imprint. So ultimately, if you read between the lines, I think there's a lot of different reasons out there he could be doing this, but I think his vocal and public-facing reasoning has largely been consistent now and going all the way back to 2015. Donald Glover is a person, and Childish Gambino is an artist, a character, and an alter ego that has a story, and that story has an end, at least as Childish Gambino is imagining it currently. Feel free to let me know what you think about any and all of that down in the comment section. I'll be chatting with you down there. Let's move on to a few more rapid fire stories to talk about today. I wanted to mention the Old Dirty Bastard documentary is going to be debuting on A&E in August. So ODB of the Wu-Tang Clan. It's titled Old Dirty Bastard, A Tale of Two Dirties. It is set to release on August 25th, and it's going to be a pretty definitive documentary on him and his legacy and what it was like to be around him, work with him at the time, and sort of what his imprint on not just Wu-Tang, but really the music world at that time could have been. There are going to be interviews from Wu-Tang members Raekwon and Ghostface Killah, as well as Mariah Carey, and more, including ODB's wife and son. ODB, to me, is a really interesting and dynamic figure whose solo music really stands out as something interesting, unique, and very much ahead of its time. His identity also contributed to quite a bit of, the image of Wu-Tang and sort of the ethos of Wu-Tang as well. So, should be a very interesting documentary, very interesting person, of course, and I look forward to watching it myself. I'm assuming you probably all also heard the news of ScHoolboy Q's concert in Toronto being canceled, potentially as a result of the Kendrick Lamar and Drake beef. Now, this became news because ScHoolboy Q himself tweeted about it and basically said as much. And from all that, there's been more tweets from ScHoolboy Q as well as responses to him, but nothing else super concrete about what actually happened here and what's going to happen in the future. So without getting into all of that, if you want to read more about this story, I have an article linked down in the description, but let's move on. I was very excited to see this week that the Alchemist and Havoc are working on new Mobb Deep music, maybe even an album. Obviously, rest in peace to Prodigy. Him and the Alchemist had worked very closely together in his later years. They worked on a couple projects together. And so if we're going to be getting new Mobb Deep music, this is definitely how I want it to come together, with someone like the Alchemist and obviously his other half in Havoc, working together on something that should uphold the vision of this group as it would stand in 2024 if Prodigy were here. So that's very cool. And then JPEGMAFIA, we mentioned a few weeks back that he is announcing a tour for an album that's got to be coming sometime, probably very soon. We are learning that Jane Remover and RXK Nephew are going to be accompanying JPEGMAFIA on the legs of this tour. Young Thug's YSL Trial, still a mess, honestly, at this point. I think the last update I gave you guys was that there was a second judge coming in after the original judge had recused himself from finishing this case. And now we are learning that that second judge has already had to recuse herself. And we have now introduced a third judge to oversee and hopefully finish this YSL Rico trial. And then finally here I got Common and Pete Rock taking their new collaborative album on tour. So that is pretty exciting because this Common and Pete Rock album has been one of my favorites of the year. Interested to know what y'all have thought about it if you got a chance to listen to it, but we now learn that they're going to be going on tour together starting in late August. Unfortunate for me, there's not going to be no Portland or Seattle show. There will be several California and New York dates, including multiple nights where they're performing twice in New York. Going to be a busy month for them, but exciting that they're going to do this album justice with a full tour, and it would be a once-in-a-lifetime experience for me to get to see Common and Pete Rock perform on stage. All that being said, let's move on to the notable new releases and editors' picks from this week of new releases. I would say on the albums front, just the fact that we got Childish Gambino and Denzel Curry albums on the same day made this one an absolute banger. Now, there are other albums worth checking out, but I'm not going to lie. For me, this is really the thing I'm going to be focusing on this week, given that there's been so many great projects throughout the year, a lot of which I haven't been able to keep pace with, but these are two albums that I don't really want to miss this week, so I'm going to be focusing on those. We did get a JPEGMAFIA single and music video, which does further fan the flames that with this upcoming tour coming, like in August, we should be getting that new album sometime, hopefully very soon. Albums announced this week, definitely an interesting handful here. I'll start with Big Sean, who released a new single titled Yes this week. Also posted a clip of a snippet of a song that him and the Alchemist are working on together, and they have a video for. So that could be very cool. And his new album, Better Me Than You, is going to be coming out on August 9th. I also wanted to highlight that Uncle John and Rex Orange County are going to be dropping new albums later on in September. We got our first 2025 album announcement in Sports Team with their debut, Boys These Days, coming out in late February. Albums releasing the rest of July. We only have one more week here, so we are getting albums from Porter Robinson, Crack Cloud, Rakim, and Ice Spice. So none of that shit really goes together, but they're all relatively interesting in their own way and could be good projects. August is going to be a pretty sweet month for albums and projects, given that we got a Moses Sumney EP coming, as well as albums from Raven Lenae, Mavi, King Gizzard, Logic, Big Sean, Post Malone, Magdalena Bay, Ty Segall, and many, many more. Albums the rest of the year: Toro y Moi, MJ Lenderman, Niloufer Yanya, Julie, Floating Points, Jamie XX, Sophie, and more. Let me know what you thought about the news this week. Let me know what you thought about the new releases and upcoming albums that were announced this week. Anything that you're excited about, let me know down in the comments section. And thanks for watching. Clicking the like button on this video, it really does help us out. I'll be back on next Friday with more news. Come join me then if you want. And thanks again for watching. I'm Dev. Peace out.